Hey, everybody. Welcome into episode 6 of Awakening the Ordinary. In this week's episode, I want to talk about a lot of current events. There has been a ton of stuff going on since my last full length Awakening the Ordinary proper episode. In the meantime, I've been doing a modern Seven Deadly Sins series, which has been awesome. It has really taught me a lot. I've been learning in my research of the traditional Seven Deadly Sins and kind of reimagining them in our new world. That's still ongoing. So check it out if it sounds interesting to you. But for this episode of Awakening the Ordinary, I want to talk about a ton of news items because there's a lot of news that's going on. Some of it has been covered pretty extensively, and I want to bring a new perspective to you. Some of it I don't think is being talked about nearly enough because it is genuinely, in some ways, kind of terrifying. So, buckle up, strap in. This is going to be a long episode. You do not have to stare at the screen the whole time. I highly recommend just popping in some earbuds, going about your day because there is a lot to cover. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First things first, I want to talk about this controversy that I'm sure you have heard about regarding the head of the DoD and many members of Trump's cabinet talking on an app called Signal about some war plans, which is in and of itself pretty unusual and concerning. But they also happened to accidentally invite a chief editor of a fairly unfriendly news corporation as well. So that, of course, led to wacky hijinks and gaslighting like you have never seen in your life. So I just want to cover that real quick. First of all, just a quick recap on exactly what happened. Pete Hegseth and a whole bunch of members of Trump's cabinet, including like the national security director, got on an application called Signal, which is basically equivalent to like WhatsApp, if you've heard of that, or like Facebook Messenger almost, where people get in a chat room, a chat group that you make, and you can just talk about things. Signal is known for being somewhat secure, and they also automatically delete messages after a set period of time. So people sometimes like to use it for sneaky things like discussing war plans. um, so Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, a bunch of cabinet members all got together. And by the way, JD Vance was there as well. And we're talking about the impending attack on the Houthis. They were spelling out basically exactly when the bombings were going to take place, what ordnance was going to be used, who they were targeting. They even talked about, in particular, J.D. Vance talked about whether or not he agreed with the attack. He actually said he didn't think we should do it right now because it kind of went against a lot of the rhetoric that President Trump was talking in regards to Europe and how we were basically kind of bailing them out and doing their dirty work for them. And those darn Europeans, they're so ungrateful. We shouldn't go bombing the Houthis for them. So there are a number of issues with this that some may not be evident on its face. But first of all, just in a basic sense, Mike Waltz, who formed the group on Signal, is the National Security Advisor of the United States. So first of all, he should know better. And second of all, he accidentally invited the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, which is a not terribly friendly newspaper to the current administration, Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg got the invitation and thought it was like a prank or something at first. He just didn't think it was legit. But he just kind of sat and waited to see what would happen. And eventually, once the bombs that they were talking about actually started falling, he realized, oh my goodness, this is real. This is not just an episode of Veep or some Saturday morning cartoon. I was actually invited to talk about secret war plans. And he left because That's the responsible thing to do. So Mike Waltz invited Jeffrey Goldberg, somebody who does not have any kind of security clearance, into this secret chat to talk about attack plans before they were implemented. There are more issues, though. So, first of all, the Federal Records Act indicates that if you are having a on the record conversation, like an actual documentable conversation, that there needs to be a documentation trail. If somebody, for example, wanted to send in a Freedom of Information Act request, that's their right. They have the right to request information. And if you don't have it written down, or more specifically in Signal's case, if you have it written down and then have it set to delete in 4 weeks, obviously nobody can access that information. So that's red flag number one. They were having secret conversations in an application that is designed to keep your conversations secret by deleting them after a while. That's pretty fishy. Second of all, they may or may not be in violation of the Espionage Act because they were revealing top secret information to somebody who had absolutely no need to know that in the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He had no reason to know that. It could be dangerous for him to know that. And they just told him outright. I mean, it was on accident, but it's like if you walked into an elevator and started having a top secret conversation when other people were in the elevator too. You obviously can't do that. That's just not allowed. And these people, every single one of them, absolutely knows better. And then when it comes to Pete Hegseth in particular, I mean, this is the head of the military in the United States. He's the head of the DoD. If any service member did what he did, they would 100% unquestionably be court-martialed. The Uniform Code of Military Justice would absolutely apply. And when the leader of an organization like the military shows that he's above the law and above rules, that really sets the tone for the entire rest of the organization. So why are our soldiers going to think that they have to follow the rules if their leader doesn't have to follow the rules? This is a serious problem. And then on top of all of that, instead of Republicans admitting we made a mistake, it was a really, really dumb idea to discuss this issue on Signal. It was classified, so we shouldn't have talked about it on an unsecured, unclassified application that literally anybody could download. We shouldn't have had this conversation on our private cell phones. We shouldn't have had this conversation when we were in foreign countries, as many of these people were, including somewhere in Asia, as Tulsi Gabbard said, or in the middle of Russia. They basically denied it. So first they were saying it's fake. It's fake news. The old tired and true fake news, baby. Not real. The Democrats are lying again. But of course it was real. And thank goodness Jeffrey Goldberg took screenshots to prove that it was real, because they were genuinely going to slander this man. So first of all, they said it didn't happen. It was just fake news, and that's that. Then when they were confronted with the truth that it did absolutely actually happen, they sort of went a few different directions. First of all, Mike Waltz went on TV and said, look, we don't know how this Jeffrey Goldberg guy got into this conversation, okay? We don't know if he hacked his way in. We don't know what's going on, but we are absolutely going to be investigating this. Of course, not paying any attention at all to the fact that Jeffrey Goldberg had a screenshot showing that Mike Waltz himself invited him to the chat. And other Republicans were saying that, well, it's really not a big deal, okay? I mean, yes, Jeffrey Goldberg shouldn't have been involved in this conversation, and that was an accident, but accidents happen. It's okay. And these weren't really war plans, because obviously, if they were war plans, that would be a problem. But we're not at war. We're just attacking. These are just attack plans. That's totally different. Okay? It's okay to share attack plans before they happen, which obviously it's not. Then they started saying that this information wasn't classified because it wasn't like officially declared as classified, which, if you ask, I mean, literally anybody who's ever been involved in any kind of war planning or implementing of attacks or anything like that, they would absolutely confirm for you that talking about an imminent attack and giving details, explicit details about it, is a no-no, and that is classified. And then they just said, basically, we don't care. Not a big deal. And that's where we're sitting right now. Republicans have decided to not take any responsibility, not even apologize, not even hold their hands up in the air and say, my bad. They don't want to slap on the wrist. They don't want a fake apology. They don't want to do anything. They will admit absolutely no wrongdoing. They don't have an excuse. It's not like they have any legitimate reason that this was okay. It's not. It is palpably, on its face, illegal, irresponsible, could have put lives in danger. I mean, I mentioned before, some of these people were in foreign countries on their personal phones when this went down. It's very, very possible that foreign adversaries could have been tapping into their communications, seeing exactly what activity was going on the network. A quick Google search will reveal the personal email addresses and phone numbers of many of these cabinet members. Pete Hegseth got under a little bit of hot water because he apparently has a Russian phone number for some reason. That's odd, but I don't want to speculate because frankly, I don't have to speculate. The stuff that we absolutely know for a fact happened is bad enough, and nobody is doing anything. Nobody is being held accountable. But that, I guess, actually brings you to my second topic, because there is one group that the Trump administration is absolutely going after as hard as they possibly can, and that's law offices. Recently, the Trump administration has released a few executive orders targeting various law offices that they have a personal vendetta against. Some of these are because, like, for example, in a recent executive order, President Trump went after a law office for employing a lawyer that worked with Mueller during the Mueller investigation. I mean, it's blatantly in the executive order. It's not hidden or anything like that. It's in the open. We do not want to support this law office because they helped aid an investigation, which is what they're supposed to do, by the way. They are attacking these law firms. They are threatening to sue them. They are saying that they are refusing to do business with them or work with anybody who does business with them, entirely because of personal vendettas. This administration is showing time and time again that they have no respect for rule of law. They have no respect for decency. They have no respect for tradition or really anything that makes America great, ironically enough. They have no respect at all for judges who are doing their job when they say that some of this stuff that you're trying to do is illegal and we need to put a stop to it, at least temporarily, to confirm exactly what you can do legally, what the extent of your authority is. The Trump administration, and that includes Trump himself, Elon Musk, cabinet members, senators, congressmen, are calling for the impeachment of federal judges for doing their job, for upholding the law. They want to remove federal judges. Even Chief Justice Roberts, who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who was appointed by a Republican, President Bush, called Trump out for that. That's not how this works, bucko. You don't get to disagree with a judge's interpretation of the law and then remove them. Like, what are you doing? There are processes for all of this. Every single thing that the Trump administration is trying to do involves basically cutting corners, taking shortcuts, and trying to trample over our rules and regulations, our Constitution. It's not right. And when your own Supreme Court justice is calling you out for it, I would hope it would make you stop and think. But instead, you get Elon Musk going on Twitter talking about trying to sue these judges, talking about trying to get them impeached, get them thrown in jail. Republicans right now, at this very moment, are trying to pass a bill that will limit judges' powers to call something illegal and put a stop to it if the president does it. This is the most clear and obvious example of the Trump administration essentially disregarding rule of law and trying to implement itself as a dictator. And I know people are scared of using that word because of all the 2016 Trump derangement syndrome, crazy pandemic of 2 scoops of ice cream and people losing their mind over Trump doing the most benign things. But honestly, how can you possibly support the Constitution of the United States? How can you support the lifeblood of law and order in this country and also support the Trump administration? They are antithetical to everything that our rule of law represents. There are processes and ways of doing things, step by step. There are ways to shut down departments in the federal government. There are ways to enact sweeping changes, but you have to follow the law in doing so. And if you truly believe that you have a mandate for that, if you truly believe that this is what the people want, then why are you trying to take these shortcuts? Why are you trying to blatantly break the law and impeach judges for stopping you from doing so? It makes no sense. There is no intellectually honest way to say that you support law and order and also support this Trump administration. There's not. And I guess this is as good of a place to mention it as any, but I just want to reiterate the fact that if you are a Republican, if you consider yourself a MAGA person, if you voted for Donald Trump this election, you don't have to hold on to that for the rest of your life. You don't have to carry this burden forever and support every single thing that he does just because you voted for him. You don't. It's okay. And I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of left-leaning people that I know that will not hesitate to tell you to go take a long walk off a short pier because you voted for the wrong guy. I'm telling you, that's not how we do things here. If you make a mistake, the only way that you can make it better is by not making that mistake anymore. To put it another way, when you dig yourself into a hole, the first step to get out of that hole is to stop digging. You can say that you supported some of the things that he promised in his campaign. You can say you support him being tough on immigration or whatever, and not support everything that he's doing right now. Because if you really take the time to look at what this administration is doing, maybe I'm naive here, but I genuinely believe that you will not support top down what's going on in our country. Just some food for thought. And speaking of immigration, there is this issue that's been going on where the Trump administration ordered ICE to start rounding up Venezuelans suspected of being in a horribly violent gang called Tren de Aragua. It is an international crime organization I guess you could say it's really similar to the Bloods or Crips or MS-13 or any of those other gangs that you heard about all the time in the 90s. But this one is based in Venezuela, and it's really horrific. I mean, the things that they do genuinely are truly awful. So the Trump administration said, we want to round up people who are suspected of being in Tren de Aragua, and we want to get them out of our country. We don't want to hold them in our country. We're out of room. We're going to go send them somewhere else. So we're going to send them to El Salvador. El Salvador's president made a deal with us. They opened up a maximum security prison facility with room enough for everybody. And they said, yeah, send them our way. Give us a little money and we'll take all your trash. But there's a couple of problems. First of all, the people that are being rounded up because they are suspected of being associated with Tren de Aragua. The Trump administration set up this like odd point-based system where essentially, depending on a few different factors, you get points that kind of add up to show how likely it is that you are affiliated with this gang. And then if you have enough points, they'll go ahead and just snatch you up and send you out. And I want to be clear, I'm not using the word deported because these people are not being deported. They're not being sent back to the country that they came from. They're not being sent to trial or anything like that. They are being essentially kidnapped off of the street and sent away in an airplane. So this point-based system is problematic for a few reasons. I mean, I heard an example recently where they were breaking down how if you have a roommate or somebody that you live with that was associated with Tren de Aragua, then you would get 2 points for living with them, another 2 points for being closely affiliated with them, 2 points for being in a picture with them on social media, another point for like being friends with them on social media. And then eventually, basically it adds up. And just for living with somebody who is actually part of a gang, you can be taken. You can be snatched up and sent away. The biggest problem with this is that there is no due process. Due process means that a structured series of laws is followed. And just like I talked about with the judges, these laws are here for a reason. There have been a few cases already. I mean, a few hundred people were snatched up and sent away to El Salvador. And already there are a couple of cases where they realized, oh my goodness, we got the wrong person. This is not good. So one of the things that they're using to identify potential gang members is tattoos. Tren de Aragua gets like crown tattoos. That's one of their symbols that they use. So they started snatching up people with tattoos that look similar. And that's a complete judgment call on behalf of these ICE agents. I mean, they don't have any like real exact specific guidelines to use. They basically look at a tattoo, and if they think it's gang affiliated, well, add that point. And if it adds up enough, snatch them up. So there was somebody who had a tattoo of like a local football team or a local soccer team that got snatched up. There was somebody who had a tattoo, 2 crowns, one that said mom and one that said dad, and they were taken because those are gang tattoos. There was somebody who had an autism awareness tattoo because their little brother had autism. And that one in particular was really heartbreaking because they had a pretty big social media presence where they showed how active they were in the community and trying to build awareness for autism and trying to work with special needs kids. But because their tattoo looked like vaguely gang related, they got snatched up. They got sent away. And not only that, but they're finding mostly people who are here legally. So a Venezuelan man came here seeking asylum because things are not good in Venezuela. They're pretty horrible right now. He came seeking asylum. He was doing all the regular check-ins that he had to do. He went to go check in and was taken. And he thought, okay, I guess I'm going to be deported. I guess they don't want to give me asylum anymore. They're going to send me back to my family. But no, they're not sending him back to his family. They're sending him to a maximum security prison in another country that he's never been to. And this prison, by the way, it's not like a nice cushy place. I mean, I think that goes without saying, but it's pretty well known for human rights abuses. People not being able to eat. I mean, they the thing that they brag about is that they don't have much violence there. And that's because they don't feed their prisoners much. They're weak. They're shuffling around like zombies because they have no strength. I mean, these people are being sent away to a foreign country with no due process. They don't get to appear in front of a judge or a jury. They aren't charged with anything. They haven't even released a list of exactly who was taken. So the government is basically showing up like the KGB, kicking down your door and taking you and putting you on an airplane. And because there's no due process, I mean, right now, sure, it looks like they're mostly getting Venezuelans or people who aren't from this country. But with no due process involved, who knows? Genuinely, they could take anybody. I have a tattoo. My tattoo prominently features a dragonfly on it. If some international crime organization springs up in Germany or something and they use a dragonfly as their tattoo symbol, am I going to get snatched up and taken with no due process? That's the thing here is they want to frame this argument in the way that, you know, we're taking all these bad criminals and there's no way you can fight for these criminals. These are bad people. Why would you support them? There's no due process for these people because they're horrible. But the whole point of due process is proving that they are actually these horrible people. With no due process, there's no way of knowing. Genuinely, no way of knowing. And this administration has already proven time and time again with all of the mistakes that they've made, both that they have admitted that they've made and that they are pretending like never happened, that they are not trustworthy. I wouldn't trust somebody that is totally and completely trustworthy to do something like this with no due process. I certainly wouldn't trust the organization that just leaked attack plans on Signal or that snatches up somebody with an autism awareness tattoo because they think they're a gang member. This is horrific. And look, I mean, I come after Republicans a lot because they're the ones in power right now. I just heard an interview with Senator Gallego. He's a Democratic senator from Arizona. And the interviewer was asking him, why aren't Democrats talking about this? And with a straight face, he looked at him and said, because that's what Trump would want. Because we don't want to fall into that political trap. So it doesn't matter that constitutional rights are being trampled. Democrats right now are absolutely crapping themselves over the results of polls because they lost in one of the most embarrassing elections that I have ever seen. And so they follow the polls, and the polls say, well, people want illegal immigrants to be deported. And so that means that apparently they don't feel like they can speak up when people who are here legally are not deported, but kidnapped and sent away on secret planes to foreign countries that they've never been to. Democrats are so scared of looking like they're soft on illegal immigrants that they're not willing to speak up. This could affect U.S. citizens. Right now, the fate of democracy, the fate of law and order is at stake, and Democrats are not willing to go to bat because they're scared of what polls say. I have this silly idea that I think the American people can understand the difference. I am 100% for having a strong stance on immigration, okay? I am not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I find it difficult to put a label on myself because I believe in, for example, offering universal health care to all of our citizens. But I also strongly believe that to do that, you have to be very strict on immigration and make sure that people don't come in and abuse that. So I am not somebody who is arguing for abolishing ICE or like whatever crazy stuff the Democrats were saying back in 2015 or whatever. That's not me. And I have this silly idea that I think Americans are smart enough to know the difference between deporting illegal immigrants and kidnapping people and sending them away to a foreign country when they're here legally because they have a tattoo of the Rolex symbol and that looks like a crown. And I think if you have a problem discussing that difference and speaking about it in an intelligible way that people can understand, I think maybe you shouldn't be in politics. So there's my gut punch at the Democrats for this episode, I guess. Suspected gang members from Tren de Aragua are not the only people being kidnapped and sent away. We are also actively deporting students. And not just students, but people who were students that now have official green cards, meaning permanent residency. And this is, in a way, even more disturbing because these people are all but citizens. I mean, they are here on visas. They are here with green cards. They are permanent citizens. And they're being taken away with no due process. This issue started with a former student named Mahmoud Khalil. He was a student at Columbia University, and he was involved in some like pro-Palestine, like anti-Israel kind of protests. And they weren't violent protests or anything like that. They weren't, burning down cars or, raiding buildings or anything like that. It was just talking about how Israel is doing things that would constitute genocide. Palestine deserves its own state, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I'm not going to get into all that. It's kind of a complicated issue. You can have various opinions or whatever. But the point is, he was exercising his First Amendment right, freedom of speech, to protest in a lawful protest as a student. Fast forward to today, and he is a green card holder. He is a permanent resident now. He's married. His wife lives here. And he was snatched up by ICE agents. They came knocking on his door for him. His wife thought it was a mistake, said, no, he's not on a student visa. He's got his green card. They said, we know, and he's coming with us. And they took him away. And they didn't charge him with anything. He has no warrant, no criminal charges, nothing. They took him away to a holding facility. And then because they didn't want anybody to know where he was, they actually flew him out of state to a different holding facility. And now they say they're going to deport him, a permanent citizen. And it is because he exercised his First Amendment rights. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter where you come down on the Israel issue. That is a complete distraction. That is not the point. Israel, Palestine, whatever. Insert your own argument here. Imagine if you held a belief strongly enough to go protest for it, and the government said, we don't like that, and so we're going to send you away. Imagine if they decided to snatch you up and send you to El Salvador, because apparently we are considering doing that with American citizens right now. Marco Rubio is claiming that the students that are being deported represent some kind of foreign policy risk. He's citing like a very old statute that we have that I think was last used around World War II about foreign policy risks and how you are allowed to deport somebody who presents like an immediate and apparent risk. But in all the research that I've done, first of all, you do still have to prove that they are some kind of a risk. Otherwise, you can just say that you feel like anybody is. You can just decide, like, I don't know, I think they might be, so I guess send them away. And that's not a power that we have. The Alien Removals Act has been used so sparingly since it was first implemented. There are only like 4 people who have ever been deported using this act. Now this administration is snatching up people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. There was another case recently where a student, and I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this name, but it's Rumisha Ozturk, who is a Turkish national, went to Tufts University and published an article in the paper a year and a half ago talking about how what Israel is doing is genocide. And she was recently snatched up by plainclothes officers These people didn't identify themselves. They were dressed like normal people. And they came up and basically kidnapped her. Eventually, they identified themselves as police officers after they put handcuffs on her. But I mean, imagine you're walking down the street and 6 thugs show up and start basically trying to drag you off. They have no identifying marks or features. They don't show you a badge. They aren't wearing a uniform. They just start to take you away. I mean, thank God nobody with her or she herself didn't try and defend themselves with weapons, because that could have ended horrifically. And I imagine many of you watching this probably would try and defend yourself with a weapon if somebody came up and started trying to snatch you and take you away without identifying themselves as a police officer. And then they shoved her in a plane and they flew her 1,500 miles away to make sure nobody knew exactly where she was and she wasn't close to any of her family. She doesn't get the chance to talk to a lawyer. She doesn't get the chance to appear in front of a judge or even know what she's being charged with. She's just taken away with no due process. And I understand for some of you, this might not hit home because maybe you don't know anybody who had a green card. And so you kind of just think of them as like this other group. But I'm telling you, first off, grow a little empathy, because when a tragedy and an injustice happens in our own backyard, it's important. And it doesn't matter who it happens to. And second of all, I need you to understand that with no due process, this could be anyone. This could be you. This could be your parents. This could be your children, your brother, your sister, your best friend. With no due process, we don't know who's being taken. The government is literally kidnapping people and flying them away. This is a nightmare. And for all the people talking about Trump derangement syndrome and, oh, it's not going to be that bad and yada, 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 it is that bad. We are there now. We are in the nightmare scenario. It's happening. And from here, it is only going to get worse, because the judges that I talked about earlier that Elon Musk wants to impeach and Trump is railing against and Republicans are saying are overreaching and like anti-USA and stuff like that, are the judges who are trying to put a stop to this. Judges who are saying, I mean, okay, you can deport people. You have very long-reaching authority to deport people that you think are a risk, but you have to at least show some evidence. You have to at least get a judge to approve it. You have to let these people have their day in court or fill out some paperwork, for God's sake. And apparently that's too much. Apparently that's more than our administration is willing to do. And to even suggest that they have to follow rule of law is tantamount to treason. We are in the nightmare scenario right now. And if you haven't been taking it seriously, it's time. So, speaking of people taking it very seriously, I want to talk about these Tesla riots very briefly. A couple of activists have gone out and started burning down Tesla dealerships, burning Teslas, defacing Cybertrucks, defacing Teslas, stuff like that. And a lot of people are really rooting for it, saying, yeah, stick it to the man, give him what he deserves. I understand. I understand the sentiment, and I am not going to be shedding a tear for Elon Musk. I am not going to be shedding a tear for people who support Elon Musk. But I do just want to chime in and say I don't think this is the best way to handle things. I know a lot of people who are more left-leaning, politically active, who support this type of thing are equating it to the Tea Party protests, where patriots sort of laid the foundation for the revolution by dumping a boatload of tea into the harbor. But the really interesting thing about the Tea Party protests is they made sure that nobody got hurt and they didn't do any collateral damage. So, for example, they broke into the ship, they busted a lock to open up the cargo hold so they could dump the tea, and then they gave the captain of the ship, the owner, money for the lock that they broke, because they wanted to ensure that they didn't inflict any collateral damage on anybody who didn't deserve it. They only wanted to hurt the foreign invaders, basically, trying to force us to purchase their tea. They only wanted to hurt the crown. They didn't want any damage to any of the underlings, anybody just doing their job. And because of that, they were able to get a lot of people on their side. I mean, you had very few people other than the loyalists, the imperial loyalists, calling what they did terrorism. But now you have quite a large number of people calling this Tesla vandalism terrorism. And I think, honestly, they have a point. It is political violence. Burning down these dealerships could cause serious harm to people. Firefighters have to come in and put out the fires. That is not something that comes at no risk. People are risking their lives to make sure that these vehicles that are getting burnt, these buildings that are getting burnt, are contained. And furthermore, people defacing Teslas, like, I get it. You don't want people to support Elon Musk. Well, look, 4 years ago, Elon Musk was like a leftist hero because he was coming up with these cars that were going to help save the environment. Then he did a big heel turn and, kind of took off the mask and showed he's basically an egomaniac, which, I mean, surprise, surprise, you could have seen that coming. But still, a lot of these people, they could have gotten in on the Tesla thing before any of this came to light. Or frankly, it could be the only electric vehicle option that they have. And they just want to do something that's better for the environment than driving around a gas guzzler. I don't think these random people need to be punished for something that Elon Musk is doing. I think the best way to protest Tesla is just financially. Don't buy Tesla. Done. I'm protesting Tesla right now. There are going to be opportunities. There are going to be times when marching in the street is going to be necessary. I promise you. It seems like it's coming real soon. But this wanton violence and destruction, it's not doing yourself any favors. It's not. Republicans are calling this terrorism. Polling shows most people agree. You're not helping your side. You're not making the point that you think you're making. So I don't know how many people watching this were thinking about burning down a Tesla dealership, but reconsider. Okay. Next up, I want to talk about what I think is probably like the most nothing burger thing, but what has the, I guess, opportunity to be the absolute worst possible thing this administration could ever do. And that's this whole stupid Greenland thing. Oh, so President Trump has, ever since Inauguration Day, kind of all of a sudden started talking about wanting to take Greenland. And I think I brought this up in a past video about how you're definitely not getting what you voted for if you voted for Trump, because he didn't campaign on invading Greenland, but he has talked about taking over Greenland for a while. And first he was talking about buying it, and more recently, he's been talking about taking it using military force. And I think it kind of goes without saying, but that is horrifically stupid and evil. So, because some people seem to be kind of supporting it, I just thought I should probably talk about it. I just want to say, I don't even think this is happening. I think it's just another one of these stupid flood the zone things. I think he's just saying it to cause trouble, basically, and maybe he does want to buy the shipping lanes around Greenland or whatever. But I don't think even Trump would stoop to invading an ally like this. But let's just break it down for a second. So Greenland is part of NATO. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's the alliance that we have with us and all the good guys, So Canada, France, England, like Europe, all the Germany, Greenland, the US, Mexico, all of us good guys, all of us powerful Western countries. We got together and we formed NATO basically to kind of ensure that Russia didn't get all imperialist on us and start taking over Europe, a la, 1940s Germany. So Greenland is also part of NATO. And part of the deal with NATO is that we all agreed to help each other out militarily if we got into a war. It's called Article 5. And basically it says that if any one country in NATO is invaded or gets into a war, basically, every other country in NATO has to act as if they were the ones who got invaded and got into the war. Article 5 has only ever been triggered one time, and it was by the United States when 9/11 happened, and we got all of NATO to come help us out in invading the Middle East. So we talk about how people don't pay their fair share in NATO and yada yada, and I get it, and it's frustrating. But the only time NATO has ever been really actively used was for our benefit. So I think that's an important thing to consider. But regardless, Greenland is also part of NATO. So if we said, if we do what we're talking about, if we put boots on the ground to militarily invade Greenland, that is starting World War III. There is no way around it. That is starting World War III. We will suddenly be at war with Canada and Mexico and Germany and France and England and every single member of NATO. So I don't, this is part of the reason why I think it is so incredibly unlikely, because I don't think President Trump wants to start World War III. I think he understands that, first of all, if it was literally the entire world against the United States, we might not win. And second of all, I think he realizes that that would be horrible for his legacy. But for all of the people who maybe are not so much in the know, this seems like a great idea. Yeah, we can bully Greenland. We can take it. Sure. Sure, they got rare earth minerals or something. And by the way, the reason that we want Greenland is because the Arctic caps are melting. And so there are shipping lanes that are going to be opening up around Greenland. And we are going to, we want to be able to take advantage of that and charge people to use those shipping lanes. Right now, Greenland has it. And Greenland is, by the way, owned by Denmark. So Denmark has it. We want to be able to take over Greenland shipping lanes and take over the Panama Canal. And then that way we can basically charge whatever we want for people to ship across the world, because we will have the only two viable shipping lanes that go across the Western Hemisphere. So I understand why we want it. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. We're not going to buy it. They don't want to sell it to us. Maybe the reason they don't want to sell it to us is because we're acting like massive jerks ever since the Trump administration has took over. And we keep talking about our allies as if they're not really our allies. And we keep bad-mouthing them. But regardless, I don't think it's going to happen. If you want it to happen, you need to reconsider, because it will be starting World War III and you'll probably get drafted. I know this is a long video. Bear with me. There's just a couple more things I want to talk about. It's been a while since I did a news update, so bear with me. There's a Wisconsin Supreme Court election going on right now. And you may be wondering why I'm talking about a Wisconsin Supreme Court election. And frankly, I'm wondering why I have to talk about a Wisconsin Supreme Court election as well. I have never in my life heard of another state's Supreme Court election getting this much coverage ever. But Elon Musk has decided that he really, really, really wants his guy to win. His guy being a MAGA apologist who dressed up as Donald Trump recently for Halloween, rather than Susan Crawford. Susan Crawford is a more liberal judge. Now, the idea behind a Supreme Court is that it is essentially apolitical. Politics aren't really supposed to come into it. It's just about interpreting the law. But Elon Musk has decided that his particular candidate, whose name is, by the way, Brad Schimmel, would be more likely to make some decisions that favor him in the near future. So he has dumped $20 million into this random state Supreme Court election. And the way that he did it, by the way, was, first of all, just by spending ad money kind of the normal way. But he also went to Wisconsin to hold a rally where he gave away two $1 million checks to people who essentially basically promised to vote for his guy. Now, this is very, murky legally because you are not allowed to pay for somebody to vote for someone. You're not. That's election interference. He is not doing that exactly. He is paying people money to vote. And he's also saying, by the way, don't vote for Susan Crawford because she's a poopy head and she's a horrible person, and vote for Brad Schimmel instead because he's awesome. But he's not technically saying, here's some money to go vote for Brad Schimmel. So the courts are going to have to decide if there's like an implication there, and we'll see what happens. But the reason that Elon Musk is so invested in this race in particular is because in Wisconsin, there's a rule that car manufacturers are not allowed to sell cars directly to consumers. So he wanted to open up 4 Tesla dealerships, and Wisconsin said, no, that's against our law. You can't do that. You can sell Teslas to dealerships who will then sell those cars to people, but you can't just open up your own dealerships. It's just against our state law. So Elon Musk is suing, and presumably this issue will make it to the Supreme Court. So Elon Musk decided that he was going to make a $20 million investment, and if Brad Schimmel won, he would have his back when it came to the Supreme Court battle. The Supreme Court would be 4-3 conservative judges, and likely he would be able to open up his dealerships. Now, as of this recording, I'm dating it, I guess, but it's April 1st. It's late in the evening, and it looks like Susan Crawford won. And I don't know her politics really. I don't know exactly what she supports, but I do know that I support democracy, and I definitely don't support billionaire oligarchs buying elections. So I'm all for it. Congratulations, Susan Crawford. You fought for democracy, and this time we won. Keep an eye on the news because I would not be surprised if in the next day or so, either Trump or Musk or Mike Johnson or whoever starts tweeting about how this election was rigged and blah, 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 blah. And honestly, very soon, Elon Musk may be facing some charges for election interference in Wisconsin. And with state charges, the president can't pardon. The president can only pardon federal charges. So things might get dicey real soon, but we'll see. Speaking of this being late night on April 1st, I wanted to very, very briefly talk about the tariff issue that's happening. President Trump has talked for a while now about tariffs, and frankly, he's kind of been flip-flopping back and forth between we're doing tariffs, we're not, we're doing tariffs, but they're limited, we're doing tariffs, but they're on everything, we're doing tariffs, but only on these countries. I mean, it really has been a mess, and honestly, it's been pretty embarrassing. It frankly makes it look like we don't know what we're doing, and I'll give you a hint. I think it's because we don't know what we're doing. Regardless, tomorrow is April 2nd, which they are affectionately calling Liberation Day, and that is when Trump is supposed to be implementing tariffs. And as of this recording, what they're saying is it's going to be tariffs on everything, every country, 20% flat. So it may be different by the time this video comes out. It probably will be, but that's what they're talking about right now. So far, the stock market has been down, but it hasn't absolutely tanked. And in all the reading I've done, what I'm understanding is that right now, the stock market has not truly reacted to the tariffs. When they were first announced, it dipped a lot, and then it kind of stabilized. And the idea is that because he's been flipping back and forth so much, people don't really think they're actually happening. And so the market hasn't reacted. By the time you see this video, if the tariffs have gone into play, then the market may be pretty low. Don't panic. I just want to add here, look, I am not a financial advisor. I just look at the lines going up and down, but don't panic. Things will get better. This may look a lot like the 2008 financial crisis. It may not. I don't know. But I do know that things will get better. They always do. So if you are scared right now, if you're terrified of the market, if you're terrified of losing your retirement, you don't know if Social Security is going to be around, I get it. These are scary times. But I want you to hold on tight because things will get better. And part of the way that things are going to get better is by building a community. One of the greatest things that I think this country has lost is our sense of community. And you can blame a lot of things for that. You can blame the rise of the internet, social media, cell phones, politics becoming more tribal, whatever you want to blame. But the bottom line is our sense of community is lost, and we are stronger when we're together. So if you are scared and terrified this week, take a look to your left, take a look to your right, and remember the people around you probably are too. Go say hi. Go knock on a neighbor's door. Wave. Start building that sense of community. I know social media has done a lot of bad, but some of the good that it's done is a lot of neighborhoods now have Facebook groups. Hop onto your local neighborhood Facebook group. Say hi. Introduce yourself. Invite somebody over for a barbecue. I truly believe that the only way we are going to make it through this, the only way you can really make America great again, is by building a sense of community. Okay, so that was a total aside. One of the last things I want to talk about is this third term rhetoric that Trump has just recently started embracing. There's been kind of this whole media like, will he, won't he? Ooh, I don't know, sort of thing going on. And Trump hasn't really talked about it too much. A lot of like Trump insiders like Bannon were talking about how it's definitely happening. He's 100% getting reelected in 2028. And recently Trump was asked about it, and he said he's in. He's not kidding about it. He's not joking. He thinks a lot of people want it. A lot of people have been asking for it, and he's going to make it happen. He says there are a lot of ways to make it happen. Try and run as vice president to J.D. Vance, and then if you guys win, have J.D. Vance step down, and then you'll be the president. And he said, well, that's one way we could do it. There are other ways too, but that's definitely one. Well, I think most people know that this is obviously not possible. It's not legal. It's not constitutional. We have a whole constitutional amendment saying you can only be president twice. And then, just to clarify, the 12th Amendment says you can only run as vice president if you are qualified to run as president, which you can't do if you've already been president twice. So there is no way that he could ever actually be president again. They could maybe try and engineer a way for him to be elevated to like win a Senate seat and become Speaker of the House, and then have every single person in line ahead of him all resign at the same time. And then somehow he would be president, I think, and that's just in my own research. I haven't heard that from anybody, but I think that might be possible, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I don't even know why the media is feeding into this other than just the idea that they just want something to talk about. This is a classic flood the zone issue. I've talked about it before. Steve Bannon talked about it, this strategy that they have. They flood the zone with crap. He didn't say crap, but I'm going to say crap. Flood the zone with crap. Fill the toilet. And then the media won't be able to focus on anything. They won't have any targets to pick because they'll be so distracted by everything that they can't actually focus on anything. So, for example, if the media is talking about invading Greenland, or if the media is talking about, is Trump going to do a third term, then they're not talking about literally kidnapping people who live in the United States and sending them on secret planes to maximum security prisons in El Salvador. Obviously, it's heinous that he is talking about this. It's heinous. It's horrible. It's truly awful, and it should be completely unqualifying. I mean, in another era, even just a couple of short decades ago, if anybody ever dared say anything like this, they probably would have been impeached, and they definitely would not have been respected politically or reelected or anything like that. So yes, this is horrific stuff that he's saying. that he's like winking and nudging about. He's like hinting at committing war crimes and invading Greenland and running for a third term. Oh, it's so cute. It's horrific. It's evil. It's horrible. It's stupid. There are not enough negative adjectives to describe how awful this is. But don't get distracted by it. Don't get distracted. It's not real. This stuff is not the real issue. The real issue right now that is affecting you and me and the people of this country are tariffs that are going to tank our economy, purposefully, by the way. And I'm going to do a whole video about that shortly. It's citizens, green card holders, asylum seekers being kidnapped and sent away. It's assaulting the First Amendment. It's claiming that judges should be impeached for upholding the law. These are the real things that you need to focus on and understand they affect you. Personally, you. Not this third term crap, whatever. I mean, just try and filter out the noise. That's all I'm saying. And finally, this is just some late breaking news. I just got eyes on it recently, but I just thought it was interesting. It caught my eye and I thought it was worth mentioning. And it seems like some cracks are forming in the Republican coalition. In the House, they were going to be voting on a procedural bill. Basically, a Republican congresswoman, by the way, was putting forward a procedural rule that if you have a baby, man or woman, you get 12 weeks to stay at home and you can have somebody else vote for you in proxy for 12 weeks. Meaning like you call up one of your colleagues, tell them, hey, I want to vote yes on this. I want to vote no on this. And they can just basically write in your vote for you if you have a baby and only for 12 weeks. And a lot of Republicans didn't like that. They thought it was unconstitutional. They thought it was like a slippery slope that could lead to other sorts of voting nonsense and whatever. So Mike Johnson was trying to basically just get that tabled. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to vote on it, whatever. Well, Republicans back in the day were pro-family and pro-life. And enough Republicans, 9 to be exact, decided that they still were. And they broke with Mike Johnson, who is the majority leader in the House. And they said, I'm not going to do what the leader of the Republicans in the House say. I'm going to do what I think we should do, what I think my constituents want us to do. And I'm going to support this bill. I'm going to support this procedural change because I think new parents deserve a few weeks to get to bond with their children before having to fly out for a week at a time to go vote and then fly back. So it looks like there are some cracks forming in the Republican coalition in the House. People are becoming less afraid to break away from leadership. And I, for one, am in support of this. I applaud them. Genuinely. I think they should always be following their conscience and following their constituents rather than following the Trump administration. Because I think I've emphasized this before, and I'm actually planning a video on this as well, but the Trump administration, they're not really Republicans. Trump is turning the Republican Party into not even being Republicans anymore. They're just the MAGA party. They just follow his whims and do whatever he wants. I mean, he talks about being an isolationist, raising tariffs, completely manufacturing everything in-house and not dealing with other countries anymore. And then the next sentence, he'll talk about trying to invade Greenland. That's not isolationist. Or they sent a memo to France saying France now has to follow our protocol when it comes to DEI stuff because, yeah, that's very isolationist. Okay. This episode has gone on long enough. I really appreciate your patience. I just want to leave this quote. I've been doing a little reading lately, and this quote from The Grapes of Wrath I thought was just so pertinent right now. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. So I just wanted to leave this with you. The works of the roots of the vines of the trees must be destroyed to keep up the price. And this is the saddest, bitterest thing of all. Carloads of oranges dumped on the ground. The people came for miles to take the fruit, but this could not be. How would they buy oranges at 20 cents a dozen if they could drive out and pick them up? And men with hoses squirt kerosene on the oranges. and they are angry at the crime, angry at the people who have come to take the fruit. 1 million people hungry, needing the fruit, and kerosene sprayed over the golden mountains. And the smell of rot fills the country. Burn coffee for fuel in the ships. Burn corn to keep warm. It makes a hot fire. Dump potatoes in the rivers and place guards along the banks to keep the hungry people from fishing them out. Slaughter the pigs and bury them, and let the putrescence drip down into the earth. There is a crime here that goes beyond denunciation. There is a sorrow here that weeping cannot symbolize. There is a failure here that topples all our success. The fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks and the ripe fruit, and children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. And coroners must fill in the certificate, died of malnutrition, because the food must rot, must be forced to rot. The people come with nets to fish for potatoes in the river, and the guards hold them back. They come in rattling cars to get the dumped oranges, but the kerosene is sprayed. And they stand still and watch the potatoes float by. Listen to the screaming pigs being killed in a ditch and covered with quicklime. Watch the mountains of oranges slop down to a putrefying ooze. And in the eyes of the people, there is the failure. And in the eyes of the hungry, there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy. Growing heavy for the vintage. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope I've informed you. I hope I've brought you some interesting news and a new perspective. I would love to hear from you below in the comments if you have any thoughts on anything I talked about or anything I didn't talk about. If you think there's something I should have mentioned and I didn't, let me know. I'll shout it out in the next video. If you want to join our Discord, I've always got a link for that below. We'd love to have you there. Thank you very much for joining us. And remember, when you change your perspective, the reality changes.